and welcome to this Artcam Express 2012 video tutorial, highlighting some of the new features available in the 2012 version. No modules are required for the completion of this tutorial. The scenario is that we have been asked to create a sign for a new Turkish restaurant, Istanbul, using traditional Turkish patterns. I have found a few patterns and cut them all into one file. Upon opening this bitmap file, I am confronted with the Set Model Size dialog. I will input 1000 millimeters in each dimension and set the origin to the center. I will now change to the 3D view. Compared to the 2011 version of Artcam Express, many more processes can now be completed in the 3D view as well as the 2D view. I can select the color shade icon in the toolbar to allow me to see the bitmap image in the 3D view. In order to create a composite pattern, I will need to create vectors around each of these individual patterns. I can do this using the Bitmap-Vector Tool. The Bitmap-Vector Tool creates a vector boundary around a specific color in the image. For example, if I choose yellow in the bottom toolbar and then select Create Vectors and then toggle my vectors on, I can see that vectors have been created around all yellow parts in the image. I can do the same with the color red. More vectors have been created. However, in the bottom left-hand and the bottom right-hand images, the vector boundaries overlap for these two colors, so duplicate vectors have been created. I must take note of these and delete them where necessary. I can select each boundary which has been duplicated and press Delete on my keyboard to delete them. I will now fast forward to where all my vectors have been created. By this point, you should have created a vector at every boundary between two colors and deleted all duplicates. If I zoom in to my bottom left-hand pattern, I can see that two boundaries have merged. This is because there is no white space between the 2 points of yellow color. This needs editing. I can select the boundary and press N on my keyboard to enter node editing. If I zoom in closer, I can see how to rectify the situation. By hovering over a node and pressing C on my keyboard, I can cut a vector at that specific node. If I select the larger boundary and delete it, it will also allow me to highlight the new Create Polyline tool at a later time. This vector must be made into a complete circle. If I hover over a node and press D on my keyboard, I can delete it. Left-click on the Create Polyline tool. We need to extend the vector which is already there, so I can click Add to an existing vector or press E on my keyboard. The polyline needs to be smooth for the circular shape, so I can select Draw Smooth Polylines or press S on my keyboard to automatically smooth polylines. If I now left-click at the end of the existing vector, I can continue the circle and join it up at the other side. To exit the Create Polyline tool, press Escape on your keyboard. After zooming out to get a better view so I can create a boundary around the rest of the pattern, I can again select the Create Polyline tool, ensure smoothing is selected, but Add to existing vectors is deselected, and then start to create a boundary around the pattern. Whilst I am creating a polyline, I can zoom in with the mouse wheel or zoom out, and I can also pan the view using Shift and pressing down the middle mouse button. This allows precise and quick polyline creation. At the top here, I want to create a sharp corner. However, with smoothing selected, I cannot. So I can press S to deselect smoothing. However, this will only take effect from the next point which I click, and not the current curve which I am drawing. So I can press the minus key on my keyboard to go back a node, and here I can draw a sharp edge very easily. From now on, I want to resume drawing smooth polylines, so I can again press S on my keyboard, and from here on out I will be drawing smooth polylines. I will now fast forward until I have completed the boundary. I have completed the boundary. However, as you can see, down the bottom left hand side of the pattern there is a white space between the boundary and the yellow colour. In order to rectify this, I can press N on my keyboard to enter node editing, select a node, and use the arrow keys to nudge it. This allows precise control of an individual node, rather than dragging it with the mouse. I can now zoom out to my image as a whole using the View Along Z button for a better overview. With all of the required vectors now created, I can fade the bitmap image in the background by using the contrast slider. I believe the pattern at the top right hand corner to be a good centerpiece for my motif. Ensure node editing is deselected by left clicking the select button on the left hand toolbar or pressing N on your keyboard, and then select all of the vectors for the top right hand pattern. I can center this pattern in the page by pressing the F9 key on my keyboard. I can select the top left hand pattern and press T to enter the transform tool. I will now do a series of transforms to align it to the other pattern. With that part in place, I can press T to deselect the tool and select another pattern. Again, I'll use the transform tool to align it in position. I can use the mirror vectors tool to create a copy and mirror the current vector selection. Ensure the copy the original objects box is ticked, and then select vertically mirror through the center. This mirror can then be transformed exactly the same. I think the star pattern in the center is a bit too regular, so I'm going to replace it with the bottom right hand pattern to create a more original look. I can delete the center two vectors and then transform the bottom right hand pattern so that it will fit into the center. With it the right size, I can press F9 to center it in my design. If I highlight all of these vectors and press Ctrl G, I can group them all, so that if I select one, all of them are selected, for easier transforming later on. I now need to create a border for my sign. I can do this using the Create Rectangle feature. If I select it, a menu for tool settings appears on the right hand side of the screen. I would like my width to be 950 millimeters, the height to be 650 millimeters, and I would like the corner radii to be 90 millimeters. I would also like inverted corners. I can check that the rectangle is situated in the center and then create it. If I offset this rectangle, I can create a border for my sign. Select the rectangle and then offset vectors. Ensure the offset distance is 25, the direction is outwards, corners are to sharp, and delete original vectors is deselected. Then select offset and close the menu. You'll notice that my composite pattern is now too large for my design. I can select it and resize it using the transform tool and situate it in the top left hand corner. In order to pattern it around my sign, I can again select it and then the mirror vectors icon. Artcam Express 2012 now features the ability to mirror something across a model and over the model. If I select across the model, then it is mirrored symmetrically about the vertical axis. If I select over model, then the same is done about the horizontal axis. If I select across model again, then I can have my motif in all four corners. If I switch to the 2D view again, I can now create my text. In order to hide the bitmap, select Toggle Relief Preview. To create the text for the center of my sign, I can click the Create Vector Text icon. You'll notice, again, a specific tool settings menu has appeared on the right hand side of the screen. Here, I'm going to select the seagull font by scrolling up to it and resize it to 90mm. Left click anywhere on the sign and then start typing. Once I've created my text, I can click Done and drag it around the screen until it is in the position where I want it. Again, I can use F9 to center it, and using the transform tool, I can move it higher up on the sign by inputting a value into the Y origin position. From this text, people won't know what Istanbul is. I need to create another line of text to tell people that it is in fact a Turkish restaurant. Again, select Create Vector Text, but this time input a size of 50. The seagull font can remain the same, however, I want roughly 60% character spacing. If I left click on the sign again, I can type Turkish restaurant. I have added tildes either side for additional flair. I can now center this again using F9 and with the transform tool move it down in the sign. Against the second line of text, the letters of the restaurant title look very cramped. To correct this, I can select them, right click and select Edit Text Block. The same tool settings which appeared before again appear, and I can enter a character spacing of 80. If I select Done, center the text again, press T to transform, and then enter the values in the same way that I did before, and then click Apply, then my title now looks much cleaner. The next step is to create a toolpath so this sign can be machined. If I left click on Toolpaths, I can set up my material block. This icon here allows me to do this. I would like my material to be a thickness of 30mm and my 0 to be at the bottom, but my model position to be at the top. If I select OK, then a material block is created. If we now change to the 3D view, we can see that the block has indeed been created. I can go to my top-down view and start creating toolpaths. First of all, select the outer boundary of the sign. To cut the sign out, I will use a profiling toolpath. This menu allows you to easily customize the toolpath. I can select my profile tool by clicking on this arrow and selecting a 12mm end mill. By scrolling down, I can check that my safe Z is higher than the material thickness, as it should be, and then select Calculate Now. a name for the toolpath is automatically created. I can see the toolpath in the 3D view, and by clicking on this plus icon I can also see it in the toolpaths menu. Select the inner boundary and then area clearance toolpath. Make sure you have assigned selected vectors and then set a finish depth of 10. Go to the tools list and add a new tool so that the area clearance can be created. For this we will use a 6mm end mill. I can now scroll down and add ramping moves, since the tool will be gouging into the material. Again, click Calculate Now and the toolpath will be created. In order to easily select the remaining vectors, I can hide my toolpaths by clicking on the light bulbs in the right-hand project menu. Select the patterns using Shift, and then again select Create Profile Toolpath. This time change the profile to along the vectors and set the start depth to 10. We have set this to 10 as we will be cutting on the part of the sign which has been area cleared. We don't want this cut to go completely through the sign, so set the finish depth to about 1.5mm below the start depth. I can now select my profiling tool and select a small V-bit carving tool that's 3mm, and then enter a name for the toolpath. I will call this one Pattern. Click Calculate and then close the menu. Finally, I can create a toolpath for my text. Left click to select the vectors for the text and then select Create V-bit Carving Toolpath. I want my start depth again to be 10mm, and then I can select a carving tool. This time I'll use a 32mm 100-degree carving tool. I can rename the toolpath to Text and then calculate it. I can now reorder my toolpaths so that the sign is cut out after all the detail has been created. To do this, left click and drag Profile to the bottom of the menu. Then, to view the simulation, I turn on all the light bulbs and then select Simulate All Toolpaths. Whilst this is happening, I can rotate the view to see what has been created so far. Once the simulation is complete, I can delete the waste material. To do this, left click on Simulation in the Project menu and then either Delete Waste Material or Auto Delete Waste Material. This time I'll select Delete Waste Material. Here we have the option to delete picked material or keep picked material. I only have one piece of material which I want to keep, so I will select the option Keep Picked Material and then click on the part which I want to keep. Finally, I can select to view this in a material more suiting of a Turkish restaurant. If I click on the material drop-down menu and then go to Beach Horizontal and then Apply, as well as clicking Material, I can slide the contrast slider to the top to view it in the new material. Thank you very much for watching this Artcam Express 2012 video tutorial. It's been a pleasure.